I now give the floor to His Excellency Damiano Beleffi, Chair of the Delegation of San Marino. Your Excellency.
Mr. President, Excellencies, on behalf of the Government of the Republic of San Marino, I would like to congratulate His Excellencies Dennis Francis on his elections as President of the 78th session of the United Nations General Assembly and to wish him a fruitful work. I would also like to extend my special thanks to Secretary General Antonio Gutierrez for his energy and determination in leading the United Nations in these difficult and challenging times. Mr. President, the coming years will be crucial not only for our future, but for that of generations to come. The promises of the 2030 Agenda are in danger. Despite years of sustainable development gains, millions of people have fallen into poverty, and hunger and malnutrition are becoming more pervasive. We are concerned by the multiple interlinked crises that are pushing our world over the brink, especially developing countries. The crisis of climate change, biodiversity loss and pollution, migration and forced displacement, the cost of living crisis, the water, food, financial and energy crisis are threatening our planet and people and derailing progress on the Sustainable Development Goals. Moreover, the intensification of conflicts in many parts of the world, together with natural disasters, which have become more frequent and intense, are causing human suffering and compromising the implementation of the 2030 Agenda. Mr. President, the increasingly evident interrelationships among global challenges highlight the need for member states, today more than ever, to work together to overcome difficulties. No individual state, even the most powerful or technologically advanced, has the capacity to face the global challenges on its own. San Marino reaffirms its commitment to multilateralism, with the United Nations at its center and in particular in the framework of the General Assembly as the most representative body of the United Nations, on account of its deeply democratic nature, universal participation, and undisputed legitimacy. We need to strengthen our commitment to implement existing agreements, such as the 2030 Sustainable Development Agenda, the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, the Biodiversity Convention, international law treaties, and to make the necessary reforms to the system. We need to revitalize the United Nations by reinvigorating the multilateralism if we want to pursue credible solutions to the global challenges. To this end, it is essential to rebuild trust in the potential of the organization, in its leadership, and most of all, trust between its members and all the stakeholders. Moreover, the global governance must become more inclusive and accountable to be effective by providing more space for the participation of civil society and private sector. It must ensure sustainable finance by catalyzing a new generation of public and private investment in global goods, but also by strengthening the global financial safety net in order to make it possible for member states to access to international funding during times of crisis. Reforms must remain at the center of our action because they are crucial to future world stability and maintenance of international peace and security. In this regard, San Marino follows with particular interest the Security Council reform. As we have stated on previous occasions, our country believes that intergovernmental negotiations favor the search for an agreement based on a broad and strong political consensus, able to reflect the interest of all negotiating groups. San Marino calls for a reform that makes the Council more democratic, transparent, efficient, and accountable. This goal can be achieved only through a continuous dialogue among member states and the awareness that overcoming the respective initial position is essential to negotiate the broadest agreement possible. Mr. President, we are facing difficult times with an unprecedented level of violence, mass atrocities, and displacement. San Marino is deeply concerned about the number and the scale of armed conflict across the globe, which cause immense suffering to millions of civilians. San Marino is also very concerned about the alarming increase of dangerous nuclear rhetoric and nuclear threats, which reinforce the image of a dark future instead of a sustainable one. Any use or threat of use of nuclear weapons is irresponsible and totally unacceptable. Unfortunately, today the risk of a nuclear weapons use, either deliberately or by accident, is higher than at any time since the Cold War. Nuclear weapons use would cause massive death and destruction and would create catastrophic and prolonged consequences on human health and well-being, as well as on the environment. San Marino reaffirms its commitment for a world free of nuclear weapons and attaches great importance to the milestone treaty on the prohibition of nuclear weapons that currently has reached more than 90 states signatories. Mr. President, the war of aggression against Ukraine brought dramatic consequences for the civilian population, including civilian death, the destruction of vital infrastructures, and massive displacement. San Marino condemns the Russian aggression against Ukraine and supports Ukraine's independence, sovereignty, and territorial integrity within its international recognized border. At the same time, San Marino welcomes all international efforts for a comprehensive, just, and lasting peace in Ukraine, in line with the UN Charter, the resolution of the General Assembly, and international law. San Marino supports the obligation under humanitarian law, such as the Convention on the Prevention and Punishment of the Crime of Genocide, the Rome Statute, and the Geneva Conventions. San Marino reaffirms its full commitment to the International Criminal Court, whose work is crucial in the fight against impunity for genocide and crimes against humanity, and it represents one of the core elements for the implementation of the responsibility to protect. The ICC, through its work, fosters accountability and thus promotes prevention and reconciliation. Mr. President, armed conflicts around the globe have dramatically impacted the lives of millions of civilians and resulted into continued and massive displacement. San Marino is alarmed by the unprecedented food and nutrition crisis affecting hundreds of millions of people around the world. The protection of civilian infrastructures is key to ensure food security in time of conflict. When infrastructures and tools essential to the survival of civilians are damaged or destroyed, food production and distribution, water delivery, sanitation, energy provision, and healthcare can all be disrupted. San Marino calls on all parties to implement Security Council Resolution 2417, which condemns the use of starvation of civilians as a method of warfare, as well as the unlawful denial of humanitarian access. Furthermore, San Marino supports Security Council Resolution 2573, which condemns attacks against critical civilian infrastructures indispensable for their survival. Mr. President, San Marino is particularly concerned about the high number of grave violations against children reported also this year in the Secretary General's report. Armed conflicts continue to devastate children's lives and to compromise their fundamental rights. We are witnessing an increase in attacks on schools and hospitals. This is unacceptable. San Marino firmly condemns attacks on schools and hospitals, as well as their use for military purposes. Healthcare and education are fundamental children's rights that must be always preserved. We reiterate our support for the Safe School Declaration. Educational facilities should be a safe place for all children, students, and teachers. We are also concerned for the substantial increase in the recruitment and use of child soldiers. We call on all member states to ratify the optional protocol to the Convention on the Rights of the Child on the Involvement of Children in Armed Conflict. We also encourage all parties to support other important tools such as the Paris Principle and Commitments and the Vancouver Principles. San Marino supports the work of the Special Representative for Children and Armed Conflict and of her office, and welcomes the new action plans and commitments that have been signed or that are in progress. Mr. President, the increasing number of conflict shows how diplomacy, mediation, and conflict prevention are tools to be strengthened for a sustainable peace. Today, more than ever, political solutions, inclusive peace processes, a conflict prevention strategy, and a strong faith in multilateralism are required. Today, we face several and interrelated security challenges. Access to natural resources is one of them. while climate change is increasingly both an existential threat and a key driver of conflict. The link between the climate emergency and security issues is self-evident, and it needs to be addressed within the Security Council in order to respond to the needs of the poorest and most vulnerable communities. The effects of climate change are causing sufferance to the most vulnerable communities, especially to small island developing states, the least developed countries, and those affected by conflict. Rising sea levels, poor precipitation, and record temperatures exacerbate the risk of instability by reducing harvest, displacing communities, and destroying infrastructures. Climate policies and green transitions offer opportunities for reducing the devastating effect of climate change. It is imperative to address the challenges posed by climate change through ambitious mitigation, adaptation, and implementation of the loss and damage agenda and an adequate climate finance agenda. If we fail, they will have devastating effects for the planet as well as development and human rights. Mr. President, without immediate acceleration of SDGs implementation, our world will endure new periods of crisis and uncertainty. The recent SDG Summit represents a chance to scale up efforts to achieve the 2030 Agenda and the Addis Ababa Action Agenda, including through development cooperation, SDG investment, enhancing macroeconomic policy cooperation, and implementing action to accelerate sustainable development, in particular in support of developing countries. San Marino commits to accelerate action to remove all legal, social, and economic barriers to achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. We support the empowerment of other vulnerable groups, such as youth and people with disability, aiming at the realization of and full enjoyment of their human rights. For San Marino, it is essential to continue to work for an inclusive and equitable quality education, including early childhood education, digital education, and stress the importance of addressing the gender gap in education. In this regard, we welcome the outcomes of 2022 United Nations Transforming Education Summit. San Marino calls on all member states to spread the benefit of digitalization by expanding the participation of all countries, in particular developing countries, in the digital economy. We also believe extremely important to accelerate the transition to sustainable food system and promote healthy nutrition, diets and consumption practices, and to recover momentum and accelerate efforts to end hunger and all forms of malnutrition. In this respect, we welcome the outcome of the 2023 UN Food Systems Stocktaking Moment, which served as the first global follow-up to the 2021 Food System Summit. Moreover, as promoter of the resolution, which established the 29th of September as International Day of Awareness of Food Loss and Waste, San Marino firmly believes that the fight against food loss and waste will contribute to promote food security and welcomes all the initiatives aiming at developing awareness in such responsible behaviors. In conclusion, Mr. President, if we want to build inclusive, equitable, and peaceful society, it is essential to find new ways of working together and to ensure that multilateral institutions will be able to address the rapid changes taking place. Member states must assume their responsibilities, including that of making our organization able to fulfill its mandate, which is to protect the citizens of the world. Thanks to its century-old history of peace and freedom, San Marino is a state with a strong vocation to dialogue and solidarity. Our state is small but proud to bring its contribution to the work of the United Nations. Thank you.
I thank the chair of the delegation of San Marino, and then